When I was about 8 or 9, my family took a skiing trip to a small resort, a couple of hours from where we lived in Spain. The resort itself was a sleepy little town of about 500 people max, with a few small supermarkets and hotels, and not much else. Typically, we picked the worst time possible to embark on the trip, which we had been planning for a good few years. The night after we arrived, there was a blizzard, and so we spent the first half of the week locked in the hotel. Although we were able to go outside for the remaining few days, we had little to do given that the slopes were shut. The story I want to tell comes from those first few days locked in the hotel. Despite my parents' annoyance at the timing of the trip being a nightmare, myself and my sister, who was 11 months older, were having a fantastic time. Locked up in the mountains with nothing to do, we were able to spend our days running around the hotel, eating sweets, and watching the TV in the lobby. I should probably mention at this point that the hotel was somewhat of a maze. The large bar and restaurant area where my parents sat each day reading was at the center of the hotel. A myriad of smaller rooms then connected to the bar area at random points, shooting off in different directions. These rooms often had no discernible function. Each one had the same mahogany interior, and they were full of couches, fireplaces, and antiques that allowed for great games of hide and seek. The rooms would often have offshoots themselves, connecting to new rooms, which would then connect to yet more useless wooden caves. As such, it was possible to be 4 or 5 rooms away from the main hotel area at any one time, without knowing exactly where you were or how to get back. Anyway, at some point along the weekend, myself and my sister decided to play hide and seek. Bearing in mind the above, it was almost an impossible challenge to find the hider. At one point in the game, I was just about to give up on searching for my sister until I heard her voice from what sounded like a few rooms away. After successfully navigating the web of rooms, I emerged to find her sitting on a couch alongside a German man with gray hair, probably in his 60s if I had to guess. As soon as I emerged into the room, the man turned to me and told me he was taking my sister to the swimming pool and asked if I wanted to come. I remember immediately thinking it's odd that there was a swimming pool that we hadn't heard of. My parents had been complaining that morning about how much TV we were watching, and so I was sure they would have taken us there had they known about it. And besides, the hotel did not seem of the size to be able to host one. I told the man that I'd have to ask my parents first, and told my sister to come back with me to find them. He immediately replied that I should go, and that he'd take my sister on ahead. I told my sister that she absolutely had to come with me, but excited at the thought of the swimming pool, she said she didn't want to. We began to argue, with the man taking my sister's side and encouraging me to go ask my parents' permission while he waited with my sister. I dug my foot in, telling my sister that our parents would be very mad if we went somewhere on our own, and after a few minutes of bickering, she eventually gave in and came back with me, giving her assurance to the man that we'd come back. Of course, when we told our parents, they were livid. My dad went back to the room to try and find the man, but with all the offshoots and given that all the random rooms looked the same, it was almost impossible to be sure that we were in the right one. In any case, there was no sign of him. I remember my dad screaming at the hotel lobby that he needed a list of all male guests and their room numbers, but of course they wouldn't give it to him. We spent the rest of the trip by our parents' side, terrified of the thought of being locked up in a blizzard with that man. Thankfully, we never saw him again. The scary thing? We checked with the lobby, and as we'd imagined, the hotel did not have a pool. I still remember vividly the day I almost got abducted. I was 12 years old and lived in an isolated seaside city surrounded by the boreal forest. The closest big town was a 2-hour car drive, and, as any lonely place, the area I grew up in was extremely depraved. Half mining town, half Indian reservation, people there were, and still are, extremely prone to violence, theft, and drugs and alcohol abuse. From my first year up until 4th grade, I went to a nearby school that was 2 small streets, or about 200 meters away from my home. But this school didn't have 5th grade, so I ended up using the bus for the first time the year this happened. At 6 a.m., I would walk out my front door and a few streets away until I got into a long street with several intersections. Every morning, our bus would pick up 3 students to a stop that was perhaps 100 meters ahead, turn at an intersection to pick up other students, come back, and take us in. We always thought it was kind of stupid to put 2 stops into a single street. And when we felt like sitting down early, we'd walk the extra distance to get in before the intersection. One morning, I got out early, as I had noticed a heavy snowstorm and thought the wind would slow me down in my walk toward the stop. I was shivering all the way there and looked right at the other stop. No one was there yet. I thought a few students might not have shown up because of the temperature, while others were probably still watching the news to check if today would be a snow day. I remember touching my face and feeling spots of hardened, cold skin around my cheeks. Small frostbites are a common occurrence in this kind of climate, but I immediately walked up to the pre-intersection stop so my cheeks wouldn't get worse. These always hurt as hell when they warm up, so I wanted to get done with it as soon as I could. For a few minutes, there was nothing but me, the raging wind, and the sting of the snowflakes hitting my face. Then, I saw an old gray car turn over the corner and roll at an astoundingly slow pace in my direction. My heart began to pound faster as I noticed the dirty-looking native who was staring at me from the driver's seat. He passed by me and pulled over in the bike lane. I stared at him from the other side of the street, wondering what the hell this man was doing this early, obstructing the bike lane in the middle of a snowstorm. I had slight vision problems but hadn't yet been diagnosed, so I squinted as hard as I could to try and see what was going on inside the car. That's when I realized he was holding something vertically in his left hand, and that said thing was pointing right at me. It was a camera. I started to panic as my muscles literally froze into place, paralyzed by fear. Why the hell was this man taking pictures of me? The thing that struck me the most was the weird way he held his camera, using only one hand and holding it sideways. I began to breathe more and more heavily as I realized I was too far from my house to run up there, and that most people were likely asleep with their doors locked. I was stuck. If he decided to attack me for some reason, there was no way I could escape. Run, I thought, as the car slowly began to move again and turned over to the side of the road I was standing on, but I was so shocked and so panicked that my body simply refused to obey me. He drove in this disturbing, painfully slow way as he got closer and closer to me. I nearly lost consciousness as he reached my stop. I felt his car begin to slow down even more when I suddenly heard a loud humming sound coming from further up the street. Another car suddenly pierced through the veil of snow, making the native man jam his foot on the gas pedal and take off at maximum speed. If it wasn't for this exact set of circumstances, I might have been caught in God knows what awful situation. One of my stopmates arrived a few seconds after, and I finally gathered the courage to run towards her. 2 years later, the corpse of an abducted 5-year-old was found in the nearby woods. I'll never know for sure if this story is related to mine, but I shiver every time I think I might have been staring at a murderer right in the eyes. I later called the cops, described the events, and got a promise that they would patrol the area more often. I never saw a police car in the surrounding in the 5 following years. As for the picture, I'll never know if it's been deleted, if it's hanging in some psycho's private collection, or if it's out there on some twisted site for all to see. So, if you happen to accidentally stumble upon a strange website and see a picture of a chubby little girl with a bright pink hat and frostbitten cheeks standing amidst a snowstorm, you'll know the story behind it. I'm a 21-year-old female, and this story took place when I was around 11. I remember this day clearly because it was the first time I was ever allowed to walk to school and back by myself. Up until the age of 14, I lived in what we thought was a safe place in Chautauqua County, New York. Everyone knew everyone. If you thought you would get away with something, then be prepared to have your ear abused by the time you got home. There was this one day, though. It was a cold winter day, and school unfortunately was still open, so all the neighborhood kids had to walk through knee-high inches of snow just to get to school. It took me longer to leave the house as I was used to walking with my older sister to school, since she knew the routes better than me. I always used to make fun of her for being paranoid and taking a different route every day, but after that day, I learned that was what saved my life. As I was waiting by the door to leave, my mom came up to me and told me that I should ride with her to drop me off because my sister was too sick to go today. Being a brat, I made a big deal about walking by myself because I was almost 12 years old and all my friends' parents let them walk alone. She looked at me for a long while, then told me to make sure I pay attention to cars. I got hit by a car and almost died when I was 9, so the worry that showed on her face was well warranted. I hurriedly nodded and headed out the door to go to school. My sister didn't like to dilly-dally, so she was always in a rush to get to school early, but seeing as it was just me, I thought it would be a good idea to take my time. I would play in the brown slush that was left on the side of the road and even make funny-looking snowballs to see how far I can throw them. Halfway to school, I notice a white van following behind me. Being the playful child I was, if I had not been bending down to make another snowball, I wouldn't have noticed it slowly creeping up the street. I told myself I was being stupid, but continued more hurriedly to school. Once I got to school, I took a quick glance over my shoulder and saw the van a few feet behind me. It wasn't until I was on school grounds that it drove away fast by me. I thought that would be the end of it, but throughout the day when I would stare out the window, the van would be there. I assumed that it never really left, just parked. Many adults would try to convince me years later that maybe it wasn't the same one, but I knew it was. This van had a bright yellow smile emoji sticker on it. I couldn't see who was in the van, but through the tinted glass, I knew they could see me. It was now the end of the day, and I wasn't ready to go home. It was too late to call my mom because she was at work and my sister was homesick. I had to suck it up and start walking home. I tried to blend in with a group of kids, but most of them were car riders, and the others didn't live near me. Remembering what my sister told me, I took another route home. I didn't memorize this route clearly, but I decided anything was better than being spotted by that van. The route I took led back to the main street where I walked to school. Hidden behind a row of cars was the white van with the smiley emoji sticker. I tried to stay calm and walk past it, but once I heard the van door silently click open, I ran. I could hear the rush of 2 pairs of heavy footsteps behind me. They were getting closer, so I did what any normal kid would do. I cut corners. I cut into someone's backyard until I was directly inside of my house and forced myself into the thick snow to make it to the door. My heart was racing not because I was running, but because I could still hear them behind me. I made it to the door and banged with all my might until someone came to the door. My sister looked confused, but when she saw my face, she pulled me inside and locked the doors. The van was still outside. It stayed out there until my brother got home. Me and my sister don't talk about it, but we both know how close it was to me going missing. I hadn't thought about this incident in years, but one of my hometown friends showed me an article that came out in 2013. Apparently some men kidnapped and sexually assaulted a girl my age. It wouldn't have scared me if it hadn't mentioned the white van.